The train screeched to a halt, and Eleanor Hayes knew she had 60 seconds before he discovered the truth. She wasn't the bride he'd ordered. She was the wrong sister. He'd paid $200 for a young, pretty wife. Instead, he got her 26, plain desperate and holding a debt she could never repay. William Brennan's eyes found hers across the platform. Cold, disappointed, already knowing. This was either the biggest mistake of her life or the beginning of everything she'd never dared to hope for. Montana Territory, 1877. This is their story. The train screeched to a halt, metal grinding against metal, and Eleanor Hayes felt her heart drop like a stone into dark water. Through the dust-streaked window she saw him, the rancher who had paid for a bride he had never met, tall, weathered, unsmiling. William Brennan scanned the platform with eyes that had forgotten how to hope. In 60 seconds he would discover the truth. She was not the woman he had chosen. She was the wrong sister, the mistake. But Eleanor had nowhere else to go. The money had already saved her family from ruin. She stepped onto that platform, knowing one thing with absolute certainty. She would have to fight for a place that was never meant to be hers. The Montana Territory stretched vast and unforgiving beneath a sky so blue it hurt to look at directly. Eleanor pressed her gloved hand against the train window during those final miles, watching the endless prairie roll past in waves of golden grass. Her reflection stared back at her from the smudged glass. 26 years old, plain-featured with brown hair pulled severely back and gray eyes that had seen too much disappointment to expect anything different now. She was traveling under a lie. The ticket in her worn carpet bag bore her younger sister's name, Violet Hayes. The correspondence tucked in her bodice tied with string was addressed to Violet. The photograph the rancher possessed that too was Violet's face, young and pretty and hopeful in a way Eleanor had forgotten how to be. But Violet was gone. Not dead, thank the heavens, but married just 3 weeks ago to the banker's son in Philadelphia. A whirlwind courtship that left their family in chaos, and Eleanor holding a bride contract she had not signed, heading to meet a man she had never seen traveling to a territory she had only read about in newspapers. The train's whistle screamed as they approached Clearwater Station. Eleanor's stomach twisted. She had rehearsed a dozen explanations during the long journey west, but none of them sounded believable even to her own ears. "I'm terribly sorry, but there's been a mistake. My sister got married. I've come in her place. I hope you don't mind that I'm 6 years older, far less attractive and completely unqualified to be anyone's wife." The truth was simpler and more desperate. Her father had already spent the bride payment, $200 that kept their family from eviction, that paid the doctor who saved her mother's life, that bought seed for next year's planting. The money was gone, dissolved into survival, and Eleanor would not ask William Brennan to forgive that debt, so she would have to convince him to keep her somehow. The train lurched to a stop with a squeal of brakes and a cloud of steam. Through the window, Eleanor saw Clearwater for the first time. It was not much. A collection of weather-beaten buildings huddled along a single main street backed by distant mountains that looked like God had torn the earth open and left the wounds exposed. The platform held perhaps a dozen people, mostly men in dusty work clothes and wide-brimmed hats, and one man who stood apart from the others. William Brennan. She knew him by the way he waited. Separate, self-contained, with the stillness of someone who had learned not to expect much from life. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet 2 inches, with broad shoulders, straining against a clean but faded shirt. His face was weathered beyond his 32 years, tanned dark by sun and wind, with a strong jaw shadowed by a day's growth of beard. Dark brown hair curled slightly at his collar. Too long for fashion, but probably practical for ranch work. But it was his eyes that caught her attention even from this distance. Even through the dirty glass, she could see they were a startling blue-green, like water over stones, and completely devoid of warmth. They scanned the train car windows with systematic thoroughness, looking for something they did not seem to believe they would find. Eleanor's hands trembled as she gathered her bag. Around her other passengers stood and stretched, chattering about their destinations. A A woman 2 rows up was meeting her sister. A salesman spoke enthusiastically about the growing cattle market. Normal people with normal reasons for being here. And then there was her. "Miss, are you departing?" The conductor appeared at her elbow, kind-faced and patient. "Yes, I'm sorry." Eleanor forced her feet to move, joining the stream of passengers toward the door. The Montana air hit her like a wall, dry and hot, tasting of dust and grass and distance. The platform boards creaked under her boots. Somewhere nearby a horse whinnied. A dog barked. Normal sounds of a frontier town going about its business, unaware that Eleanor's entire future balanced on the next 5 minutes. William Brennan moved through the small crowd with easy confidence, his eyes still searching. He held a piece of paper. Probably Violet's letter. Probably the photograph. Eleanor's chest tightened. When he looked at her face and compared it to Violet's picture, the disappointment would be immediate and absolute. She set her carpet bag down and waited, chin raised. Better to face it head-on than try to hide. His gaze swept past her once, returned, stopped. For a long moment William Brennan simply stared, his expression unreadable. Then he walked toward her with deliberate steps, his boots loud on the platform boards. He stopped 3 feet away, and Eleanor got her first close look at the man who had bought himself a bride. His face was harder than she had expected. Not cruel, but carved by weather and work, and something deeper. A loneliness so profound it had shaped his bones. His eyes, that startling blue-green, moved over her face with systematic assessment, looking for Violet's delicate features, Violet's soft mouth, Violet's youth, finding none of it. "You're not her." His voice was low, rough with disuse, stating fact rather than asking questions. "No." Eleanor kept her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I'm not. My name is Eleanor Hayes, Violet's older sister." "Where's Violet married 3 weeks ago to someone else?" Something flickered in his eyes. Not quite anger. More like confirmation of an expectation. "I see. So you thought you'd come collect the money anyway? Is that it?" "The money's been spent." Eleanor met his gaze directly. "My father used it to save our farm and pay for my mother's medicine. She was dying. The money saved her life. So, no, I can't pay you back. But I can work. I can cook, clean, manage a household, handle accounts. I grew up on a farm. I know animals, planting seasons, weather patterns. Keep me on as hired help. You don't have to marry me. Just let me work off the debt." William's jaw tightened. Around them the platform had mostly cleared. A few townspeople lingered, watching this exchange with undisguised curiosity. Eleanor could feel their eyes, their judgment. The mail-order bride who was not what she was supposed to be. "I didn't send for hired help." His words were clipped. "I sent for a wife. I understand. And I'm sorry I'm not what you wanted, but I'm what you got. And I'm asking for a chance to make this right. 3 months. Give me 3 months to work off the debt. If I'm not useful enough to keep, I'll find another way to repay you." "Another way?" His tone held skepticism. "What other way? There's no work here for single women except the saloon, and you don't look like you'd last a day in that life." Heat rose in Eleanor's cheeks, but she did not back down. "Then I suppose you'd better say yes to my offer, because I'm not leaving until this debt is settled one way or another." They stared at each other. 2 stubborn people locked in a battle of wills neither had expected to fight. Eleanor could see the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of options, none of them good. She was the wrong woman, but she was here, and apparently shameless enough to refuse to disappear quietly. Finally, William bent and picked up her carpet bag with one hand, the motion sharp with frustration. 3 months. You'll sleep in the spare room. You'll earn your keep with housework and cooking. You'll stay out of my way and away from the ranch hands. And when the 3 months are up, you'll leave quietly. Those are my terms. Agreed. Relief flooded through Eleanor so intensely she felt dizzy. The wagon's this way. William turned and walked toward the street without waiting to see if she followed. Eleanor grabbed her smaller bag and hurried after him, acutely aware of the whispers starting up behind her. She had made a spectacle. In a town this small, everyone would know by nightfall that William Brennan's mail-order bride was the wrong woman. But she had gained 3 months. 3 months to prove her worth, to earn enough to justify her keep, to find some way to make this catastrophic mistake into something survivable. The wagon was exactly what she had expected. Functional, weathered, pulled by 2 sturdy horses that looked as work-hardened as their owner. William threw her carpetbag into the back without ceremony, then stood by the side, clearly waiting. He was not going to help her up. Fair enough. Eleanor gathered her skirts, placed her boot on the wheel spoke, and hauled herself onto the bench seat with as much dignity as she could manage. William swung up beside her with the ease of long practice, took up the reins, and clicked to the horses. They rolled out of town in silence. The ranch lies 7 miles west. William's voice after the first mile was flat, delivering information without emotion. Broken Creek Ranch, 800 acres of grazing land. Bought with money I saved over 10 years of working other people's land. I run 200 head of cattle, keep a dozen horses, employ 3 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse. The main house was built by the previous owner and needs work. Water comes from a well and the creek that gives the property its name. Eleanor listened, filing away each detail. She would need to know all of it if she was going to be useful. "How long have you been alone?" She asked the question carefully. 5 years. My mother lived with me the first 3 years. She died 2 winters ago. I'm sorry. Don't be. She was ready to go. More silence. The wagon creaked and swayed over the rutted road. Grass stretched endlessly on both sides, interrupted occasionally by scattered stands of cottonwood trees. The mountains to the west grew larger, their peaks still white with snow despite the summer heat. Why'd you do it? William's question came suddenly. Why'd you come instead of just sending word the contract was broken? Eleanor considered lying, considered softening the truth, decided against both. Because the money saved my mother's life, and I couldn't ask you to forgive that debt. Because my sister has a chance at real happiness, and I wasn't going to ruin it by making her honor a contract she'd signed in desperation. And because, she paused, surprised by the honesty rising in her throat. Because I had nothing else. No prospects, no future. 26 years old and already considered too old, too plain, too practical to be anyone's first choice. This might be a disaster, but it's still more than I had back in Philadelphia. William's hands tightened on the reins, but he did not respond, did not offer platitudes or arguments, just drove his profile hard against the endless sky. They passed a marker, a pile of stones with a weathered board reading Broken Creek 3 miles. The land began to change subtly, rising and falling in gentle swells. A creek appeared to their right, lined with willows, its water running clear over smooth stones. That's the north boundary. William nodded toward the creek. Property follows it for about 2 miles, then cuts west toward the mountains. Cattle mostly stay in the valley during summer. We move them to lower pastures for winter. How many acres under cultivation? None. This is grazing land, too dry for crops most years. Eleanor nodded, adjusting her expectations. Ranching, not farming. Different skills, but she would learn. She would have to. The house appeared as they crested a low rise, a 2-story structure of weathered wood with a covered porch running along the front. It was larger than she had expected, but clearly neglected. The porch sagged slightly on one side. Several shutters hung crooked. The yard was packed dirt, trampled hard by boots and hooves, with no attempt at a garden or flowers. Behind the house stood a barn, a corral, and a smaller building that must be the bunkhouse. Cattle dotted the distant pastures, dark shapes against the golden grass. A few horses grazed in the corral, raising their heads to watch the wagon approach. William pulled up in front of the house and set the brake. "Supplies come from town once a month. I'll take you in when we need to restock. Otherwise, you stay here. There's trouble sometimes. Men passing through, drifters looking for easy pickings. You see anyone you don't recognize, you get in the house and bar the door." Understood. Understood. He jumped down and pulled her bag from the wagon bed. Eleanor climbed down on her own landing with a small cloud of dust. This close she could see the house in detail. Peeling paint, cracked windows, a door that did not quite hang straight. "I'll show you inside. You can have the spare room. Was my mother's before she took sick, and I moved her downstairs." William carried her bag toward the house, his boots heavy on the porch steps. The door opened into a front room that made Eleanor's heart sink. Dust coated every surface. Cobwebs draped the corners. A cold fireplace held the remnants of last winter's ashes. Furniture sat arranged with no thought to comfort or aesthetics. Chairs that did not match. A table scarred by years of abuse. A sofa with stuffing visible through tears in the fabric. Kitchens through there. William nodded toward the doorway. My room's down here past the kitchen. Spare rooms upstairs. There's another room up there too, but the roof leaks. Haven't gotten around to fixing it. He led her up a narrow staircase that creaked with every step. The spare room was small. A bed, a dresser, a single window looking west toward the mountains. Dust lay thick here too, and the air smelled stale. Closed off. William set her bag on the bed. I'll leave you to settle in. Supper's at 6. Nothing fancy, usually just meat and bread. If you want to cook, the kitchen's yours, but I'm not expecting anything. I'll cook. Eleanor removed her gloves, already assessing what needed to be done. When do the ranch hands eat? They cook for themselves in the bunkhouse. You're not responsible for them. Understood. William moved toward the door, then stopped, turned back. For a moment, something almost human flickered in his eyes. A question, maybe. Or regret. This isn't what either of us wanted. But you're here now, and I gave my word about the 3 months. I'll keep it. Just stay out of trouble. Don't give the men ideas, and don't make me regret this more than I already do. Then he was gone, his boots loud on the stairs. Eleanor stood alone in the dusty room, listening to the house settle around her. Through the window she could see the barn, the corral, the vast sweep of land rolling toward distant mountains. This was her home now, for 3 months at least. Maybe longer, if she could prove herself indispensable. She unpacked quickly. 3 dresses, a nightgown, underclothes, a few personal items that fit in the dresser's top drawer. Her mother's wedding ring kept after the funeral. A book of poetry. A letter from Violet full of apologies and promises that meant nothing now. Then she rolled up her sleeves and went downstairs to face the kitchen. It was worse than the front room. Dishes piled in a basin, some crusted with food days old. The stove looked like it had not been properly cleaned in months. The pantry held basics: flour, beans, salt, pork, coffee. But everything was disorganized, some items stale, others nearly empty. The floor needed scrubbing. The windows needed washing. The whole room needed the kind of deep cleaning that took hours of hard work. Eleanor found an apron hanging on a hook, probably William's mother's from the size, and tied it around her waist. Then she pumped water into a large pot, set it on the stove to heat, and began the work of transforming chaos into order. 2 hours later, she had made progress. The dishes were washed and stacked. The counters were scrubbed. The floor was cleaner, though it could use another going over. She had found vegetables in a cellar: potatoes, onions, carrots, and made a beef stew using the salt pork and dried beef from the pantry. Bread was rising in a bowl near the stove. The windows were open, letting in fresh air that drove out the smell of neglect. She was stirring the stew when William appeared in the doorway. He stopped, surprise clear on his face, as he took in the transformed kitchen. "It's not done," Eleanor said quickly. "I'll need at least another day to get it properly clean, but the stew should be ready in about 20 minutes and the bread shortly after that." William moved into the room slowly, his eyes tracking over the changes. He touched the clean counter as if he did not quite believe it was real. How did you? I've been cleaning for 2 hours. Your mother's supplies were good. I just had to organize them." Eleanor kept her voice matter of fact. "I'll need to inventory the pantry tomorrow, make a list of what we need. Some of the flour is going stale and you're nearly out of coffee." "Right." William pulled out a chair at the small kitchen table, still looking slightly dazed. "Coffee. I'll add it to the town list." They ate in awkward silence. The only sound was the clink of spoons against bowls. The stew was good. Eleanor knew it was good. But William ate with his head down, not commenting, not looking at her. He took seconds, though, which she counted as a victory. When he finished, he stood and brought his bowl to the counter. "That was fine. Thank you." "You're welcome." He paused, seeming to struggle with something. "Finally, I'm usually up at dawn. I'll leave bread and coffee out for you, but I don't expect you to cook breakfast." "I don't mind cooking. I said I don't expect it." His tone left no room for argument. "Good night, Eleanor." He left through the back door, and a moment later she heard his boots on the porch, then silence. Eleanor cleaned up the supper dishes, covered the remaining stew, and banked the fire in the stove. Then she lit a lamp and carried it upstairs to her small room. Night had fallen while she worked, and through the window she could see stars scattered across the sky like salt spilled on a black table. So many stars, more than she had ever seen in Philadelphia. The silence was immense, broken only by distant sounds. Cattle lowing, horses shifting in the corral, the creek running somewhere in the darkness. Eleanor sat on the bed suddenly exhausted. Her hands ached from scrubbing. Her back hurt. Her eyes burned with fatigue. But she had made it through the first day. She had shelter food and 3 months to figure out the rest. She changed into her nightgown, braided her hair, and slipped under the thin blanket. The mattress was lumpy but clean enough. The pillow smelled faintly of lavender. William's mother, probably, a woman who had once made this house a home. "I can do this," Eleanor told herself in the darkness. 3 months. Just 3 months. One day at a time. But as she lay there listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling for the night, she could not shake the image of William's face when he had first seen her. That moment of realization that she was not Violet, was not young, was not pretty, was not the hopeful new beginning he had paid for. She was just Eleanor, the wrong sister, the mistake, and she had 90 days to prove that sometimes the mistake was exactly what was needed. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the window and the sound of William's boots on the stairs below. Eleanor woke with a start, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. Montana, the ranch, her new temporary home. She dressed quickly in her plainest work dress, dark gray calico that would not show dirt, and pinned her hair into a tight bun. When she reached the kitchen, William was already gone, but he had left bread and cheese on the counter, as promised. Coffee sat in a pot on the stove, still warm. Eleanor poured herself a cup and stood at the window looking out at the ranch in full daylight. The barn door stood open. She could see movement inside. William, probably, or one of the ranch hands. The horses in the corral grazed peacefully. Cattle dotted the far pastures dark against the grass. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, like William himself. She spent the morning finishing what she had started the night before. The kitchen floor got another scrubbing. The pantry was inventoried items organized by type stale goods discarded. She found a chicken coop behind the house. Empty, but the hens were roosting in the barn instead. She would have to mention that to William. Fresh eggs would improve their meals considerably. By noon she had moved to the front room. Dust was swept, cobwebs removed, windows washed until they sparkled. The furniture was hopeless, scarred and stained beyond redemption. But at least it was clean. She found a broom closet with a few rags and set about polishing what could be polished. She was on her hands and knees scrubbing the floor when the front door opened. Well, I'll be damned. Eleanor looked up to find a weathered man in his 50s standing in the doorway, hat in hand, staring at her with undisguised curiosity. He wore dusty work clothes and had the bow-legged stance of someone who spent more time on horseback than on foot. "Ma'am," he said, recovering his manners, "I'm Franklin Cooper, foreman here. Heard there was a new lady on the property. Thought I'd come introduce myself proper." Eleanor stood wiping her hands on her apron. "Eleanor Hayes. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Cooper." "Franklin's fine, ma'am. Mr. Cooper makes me sound too respectable." His eyes twinkled with humor. "Boss said you weren't what he was expecting." "That's one way to put it." Eleanor met his gaze directly. "I'm here to work off a debt. 3 months. After that we'll see." Franklin nodded slowly, approval evident on his weathered face. "Honest work's nothing to be ashamed of. Place could use a woman's touch, that's for sure. Been going to seed since Mrs. Brennan passed. The boss, he's a good man, but he's got no notion about keeping a house. I'm beginning to see that. You need anything? Supplies from the barn help with heavy work. You let me or the boys know. There's Carlos and Jimmy in the bunkhouse. Good men, both of them. They'll treat you respectful or answer to me." "Thank you, Franklin. "I appreciate that." He nodded, replaced his hat, and turned to go. Then he paused. "For what it's worth, ma'am, I think you coming here might be the best mistake that ever happened to this ranch. The boss, he's been alone too long, makes a man hard. Maybe you'll gentle him back some." Then he was gone, leaving Eleanor alone with his words echoing in the clean room. "Maybe you'll gentle him back some." She did not think William Brennan was the kind of man who wanted gentling, but maybe, just maybe, he was the kind of man who needed it. The days fell into a rhythm. Eleanor rose at dawn, cooked breakfast, though William never stayed to eat with her, cleaned and organized and repaired what she could. She inventoried supplies, made lists, learned the patterns of the ranch. The chickens were coaxed back to their coop. The vegetable garden plot behind the house, long overgrown, was cleared and prepared for late-season planting. William avoided her. He left before she came downstairs, returned for a quick midday meal, eaten in silence, then disappeared again until supper. He spoke only when necessary, his words clipped and functional. But he ate everything she cooked, and she noticed small changes. Tools put away properly, mud scraped from boots before entering, fresh water brought to the house each morning without being asked. On the fourth day, Eleanor decided to tackle William's room. She knew it was risky. The spare bedroom had been implied as her domain along with the common areas. But his room, she had glimpsed it when she had walked past, and the chaos inside had made her ache. A man living like that in deliberate disorder was a man who had given up on comfort. She knocked on the closed door first, even though she knew he was out working. No answer, of course. She pushed it open. The room was larger than hers, with a window facing east and furniture that had once been good quality. But dust lay thick on every surface. Clothes were piled on a chair. The bed was unmade blankets tangled. Papers covered the small desk. Ranch records, she realized, completely disorganized. Eleanor hesitated only a moment. Then she rolled up her sleeves and began. 2 hours later, the room was transformed. Bed made with tight corners. Clothes washed and folded. Desk organized, papers sorted into neat stacks by date and type. Floor swept, windows washed, furniture polished. She had even found a vase and put wildflowers from the creek bank on the dresser. A small touch of beauty in a space that had held none. She was just finishing when she heard the front door open. William's boots came down the hall, stopped outside his room. Silence. Eleanor stepped into the hallway to find him standing frozen in his doorway, staring at his transformed room. "I'm sorry if I overstepped," she said quickly, "but I'd cleaned everything else and I thought, you went through my things. I organized them. I didn't read anything personal. The ranch records were mixed up, so I sorted them by date. Everything else I just put away properly." William turned to look at her, and for the first time since she had arrived, she saw real emotion in his eyes. Not anger as she had expected. Something more complex. Confusion maybe. Or the pain of having private spaces invaded even with good intentions. "I didn't ask you to do this. I know, this room is off limits. Understood?" "Understood." He looked back at the clean room, his jaw tight. Then so quietly she almost missed it. "Thank you." He walked inside and closed the door behind him. Eleanor stood in the hallway, her heart pounding. She had crossed a line. But maybe she had also shown him that someone cared enough to cross it. That night at supper, William spoke first. "I'm taking cattle to market next week. Franklin and the boys will handle most of it, but I need to go into town for supplies after. You should come. Make a list of what you need." Eleanor looked up surprised. "Are you sure you're running the house? You should know what's available and what it costs." He stabbed a potato with his fork. "Besides, people will talk less if they see you're actually working. Not just living off my charity. Something like that." She nodded. "I'll make a list." Progress, she thought. Small, grudging progress, but progress nonetheless. The week passed in steady work. Eleanor finished cleaning the house from top to bottom, then started on repairs. A broken shutter was rehung. Loose floorboards were hammered down. The leaking upstairs bedroom. She could not fix the roof, but she patched what she could from inside and moved the bed away from the worst spots. Franklin and the ranch hands treated her with careful respect. Carlos, older and quieter, thanked her profusely when she stitched a torn shirt he had left on the porch. Jimmy, a young man barely 20, blushed whenever she spoke to him. They were not allowed in the house. William's rule, apparently. But they found excuses to pass by the kitchen window drawn by the smells of fresh bread and real cooking after months of their own rough meals. On market day, Eleanor woke early and packed food for the journey. Sandwiches, hard-boiled eggs, apples from the last batch she had found in the cellar. She wore her best dress, dark blue, with only a few patches, and took extra care with her hair. William appeared at dawn with the wagon already loaded. Ready. The ride to town took 2 hours. William spoke more than usual, explaining the market process, the prices he expected the buyers who would be there. Ranch talk, business talk. But still it was conversation. Eleanor listened and asked questions when appropriate, filing away information about cattle weights, seasonal prices, transportation costs. Clearwater was busier than on her arrival day. The market brought ranchers from miles around, all trying to get the best price for their stock. William handled his business efficiently, shaking hands with buyers, negotiating firmly but fairly. Eleanor waited by the wagon, acutely aware of the looks she received. The whispers, "That's her. The wrong bride. Poor William." She kept her head high and her expression neutral. After the cattle were sold, William led her to the general store, a building that smelled of coffee and leather and possibility. "Get what you need. I'll settle the account." Eleanor moved through the store, methodically checking her list. Flour, sugar, coffee, salt, baking powder, fabric for new curtains, thread and needles for mending, seeds for the vegetable garden. It was late in the season, but she could still plant fast-growing crops. She chose carefully, watching prices, calculating costs in her head. At the counter, the storekeeper totaled her purchases with raised eyebrows. "That's quite a list, miss. You planning to stay a while?" 3 months at least." Eleanor met his eyes steadily. "The ranch needs supplies." William appeared at her elbow, counted out coins without comment, and helped carry the packages to the wagon. As they loaded everything, a voice called out across the street, "William Brennan, I heard you finally got yourself a bride." A woman approached, fashionably dressed, perhaps 50, with carefully styled hair and a smile that did not reach her eyes. 2 other women flanked her, equally well-dressed, equally curious. William's shoulders tensed. "Mrs. Caldwell. Ladies. Well, aren't you going to introduce us to your new wife?" Mrs. Caldwell looked Eleanor up and down with barely concealed disdain. "This is Eleanor Hayes. Eleanor, Mrs. Caldwell owns the boarding house. Mrs. Carson and Miss Beaumont are—" "We've all been simply dying of curiosity," Mrs. Caldwell interrupted. "When we heard you'd sent for a bride, we wondered what kind of woman would come all this way for a rough rancher. Now I see." Her smile sharpened. "How practical." Eleanor felt the insult like a slap. Practical, plain, useful, never beautiful, never desirable. Eleanor's settling in well. William said, his voice carefully neutral, "If you'll excuse us, we need to get back to the ranch." But Mrs. Caldwell was not finished. "Such a shame about your sister, dear. We heard she married someone else. That must have been awkward. Did she know you were planning to take her place?" The cruelty was deliberate, designed to wound. Eleanor forced herself to smile. "My sister is very happy. And yes, this arrangement suits everyone involved. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do." She turned toward the wagon, but Mrs. Caldwell's voice followed her. "Such dedication. Though I suppose when you're past marriageable age, you take what opportunities you can get." Eleanor's hands clenched on the wagon rail. She felt William go rigid beside her. For a moment she thought he might say something, defend her, contradict the obvious truth of Mrs. Caldwell's words. But he simply helped her onto the wagon seat and climbed up beside her. They rode out of town in silence, the echo of mocking laughter following them down the dusty street. "Don't let them bother you," William said finally after a mile had passed. "Mrs. Caldwell is speaking the truth." Eleanor's voice was steady despite the hurt. "I am past marriageable age. I am practical rather than pretty. These are facts, not insults." Still shouldn't have said it. No, she shouldn't have. But people rarely worry about should when it comes to cutting down someone they see as lesser. William said nothing more, but his hands were tight on the reins. That night, Eleanor found a package on the kitchen table. Fabric, far better quality than what she had chosen at the store. Enough for a new dress. Not the gray or brown of work clothes, but a soft green that would complement her eyes. There was no note, no explanation. Just the fabric carefully folded and the suggestion of kindness from a man who did not seem to know how to show it any other way. Eleanor touched the fabric gently, her throat tight. 3 weeks into her 3-month contract, and already things were becoming complicated. She had come here to work off a debt to prove she could be useful to survive. She had not expected to start caring about what William Brennan thought of her, had not expected to feel something tighten in her chest when he showed these small, wordless considerations. Definitely had not expected to look at his hard, lonely face and wonder what it would take to make him smile. Outside, the Montana sky stretched vast and full of stars. Inside, the clean house held a warmth it had not known in years. And upstairs, in a small room that was starting to feel like home, Eleanor Hayes lay awake and wondered what would happen when 3 months ended and she had to decide whether to stay or go, and whether William Brennan would care either way. The green fabric became a dress over the next 3 evenings, stitched by lamplight after the day's work was done. Eleanor's fingers remembered the rhythm from years of making do, turning scraps into something wearable, transforming charity into dignity. When she finally put it on, the bodice fitted properly, the skirt falling in clean lines. She barely recognized herself in the small mirror over her dresser. The color softened her face, made her gray eyes look almost luminous. For just a moment she allowed herself to imagine she was the kind of woman a man like William Brennan might have chosen on purpose. Then she remembered Mrs. Caldwell's words, pinned her hair back severely, and went downstairs to start breakfast. William was already in the kitchen, which was unusual. He stood by the window with his coffee, watching the dawn break over the eastern pastures. He turned when she entered, and his eyes went to the dress. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Appreciation. But it was gone before she could name it. "Morning," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Morning. I'll have breakfast ready in 20 minutes. No need. I wanted to talk to you first." Eleanor felt her stomach tighten. Was this it? Had she done something wrong? Was he sending her away early? William set his cup down, his movements deliberate. "The fall roundup starts next week. We'll be bringing the cattle down from the high pastures, sorting them, branding the late calves. It's hard work, long days. Franklin and the boys will be busy from dawn to dark." Eleanor cracked eggs into a bowl, waiting. There was more coming. "I was planning to send you into town during that time. Have you stay at the boarding house? Wouldn't be proper you here with just the men and me occupied." Her hands stilled. "You're sending me away. For a week, maybe 2, until the work's done. And who will cook for you? Who will keep the house? Who will handle the accounts and make sure supplies don't run short when you're working 18-hour days and too tired to remember you need to eat?" William's jaw tightened. "We'll manage. You'll eat cold beans and stale bread and work yourself sick because you're too stubborn to accept help." Eleanor set the bowl down with more force than necessary. "I came here to work, William, to earn my keep. You can't just put me on a shelf whenever it's convenient. It's not about convenience. It's about propriety." "Propriety?" She almost laughed. "I'm the woman who came here under false pretenses, the wrong bride, the mistake. Mrs. Caldwell made sure the whole town knows I'm past marriageable age and desperate enough to work off my sister's debt. What propriety do you think I have left to protect?" The words came out harder than she had intended, edged with a bitterness she usually kept locked away. William looked at her for a long moment, his blue-green eyes seeing too much. "I don't think you're desperate," he said quietly, "and I never called you a mistake." Something in her chest twisted. She turned back to the eggs, whisking them with sudden intensity. "The roundup. Tell me what needs to be done." "Eleanor, if you send me to town, Mrs. Caldwell and her friends will have 2 weeks to spread stories about how I'm not even useful enough to keep during busy season. Is that what you want? To prove them right?" Silence. Then William moved to the table and pulled out a chair, the legs scraping against the floor. The work will be hard. Early mornings, late nights. We'll need hot meals ready when we come in. Coffee by 4 in the morning. Food packed for midday. Medical supplies on hand. Injuries happen. Someone to ride out if we need extra hands or supplies from town. Eleanor poured the eggs into the heated skillet. I can do all of that. You'll have to manage the horses when we're out. Feed them, check them for injuries or illness. Can you handle that? I grew up on a farm, remember? I've handled horses since I was 10. Another pause. You'll stay out of the branding and sorting areas. The cattle get unpredictable, and I won't have you getting hurt because you tried to help where you shouldn't. Agreed. And you'll wear sensible clothes. No skirts that'll catch on fences or trip you up. William. She turned to face him, spatula in hand. I'm not a fool. I know my limitations. But I also know I can help if you'll let me. The question is whether you trust me enough to try. He studied her face, and she met his gaze steadily. This was the test she realized. Not cooking or cleaning or managing the household. Those were skills easily proven. This was about whether he could see her as something more than a burden he had agreed to carry for 3 months. Finally, William nodded once. All right, you can stay. But you follow my rules exactly. No arguments, no exceptions. No arguments, no exceptions. Eleanor agreed. Relief flooded through her, though she kept her expression calm. Now sit down and eat before these eggs get cold. The corners of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close enough that Eleanor felt absurdly pleased as she slid the eggs onto a plate and added bacon and fresh bread. William ate with the focused attention of a man who had forgotten food could be more than fuel, and when he finished he carried his plate to the sink himself. Good breakfast, he said. Thank you. Then he was out the door, leaving Eleanor alone with the morning light and the strange warm feeling that she had just won something important. The week before Roundup, Eleanor prepared like a general planning a campaign. She inventoried medical supplies, restocked what was low-organized everything so it could be found quickly in an emergency. She baked bread in advance, preserving it as best she could. Dried meat-packed beans, made hard biscuits that would last in saddlebags. Checked every pot pan and utensil, repaired work shirts with reinforced seams, even made a batch of liniment for sore muscles from a recipe William's mother had left written in faded ink inside a cupboard. Franklin found her in the barn on Saturday afternoon, checking the condition of the extra saddles. He leaned against a post, amusement clear on his weathered face. "Boss, know you're out here," he said to manage the horses. "Can't do that without checking the equipment." Eleanor ran her hand along a stirrup strap, testing for weak spots. "This one needs replacing. The leather's cracked. I'll get Carlos on it." Franklin moved closer, his expression turning serious. "You sure about staying through Roundup, ma'am? It's not going to be easy. The boss, he gets focused during this time, short-tempered, doesn't have patience for mistakes. Then I'll try not to make any." Eleanor met his eyes. "Franklin, I need this to work. I need him to see that I'm not just a burden he got stuck with." "You think that's how he sees you?" "I think he doesn't know how to see me at all, and I think if I can prove myself during Roundup when things are hard and the stakes are high, then maybe when the 3 months are up he'll consider letting me stay." Frank scratched his jaw thoughtfully. "You want to stay past the 3 months?" Eleanor had been asking herself the same question for days. She had come here with no expectations beyond survival, working off a debt she could not repay any other way. But the ranch had gotten under her skin. The vast sky, the clean air, the honest work. The way William's face softened slightly when he came in to find a hot meal waiting. The small satisfactions of bringing order to chaos, making something useful from neglect. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she said finally. "And this place needs someone who cares about it. William works himself to exhaustion." The house was falling apart. Even the chickens had given up and moved to the barn. "Someone needs to make this a home again, not just a place to sleep between workdays." Franklin's expression gentled. "Mrs. Brennan used to say the same thing. She tried hard to make it warm here, but the boss's father was a hard man. Then after he died and William took over, his mother got sick. She worried about leaving him alone, said he'd let the place go to seed without someone to care for it properly. Looks like she was right. Did she? At the end, did she know William was sending for a bride? She knew. Made him promise, actually. Said he needed a partner, not just hired help. Someone who'd build a life here, not just pass through. Franklin smiled sadly. She'd probably be happy about you being here, even if it happened all wrong. You got that same determined look she used to get when she decided something needed fixing. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. I wish I could have met her. She'd have liked you. Would have appreciated someone practical instead of some young girl looking for adventure or romance. He straightened, tipping his hat. I'll tell the boys you've got full authority over the horses and supplies. They give you any trouble, they answer to me. Thank you, Franklin. Don't thank me yet. Wait till you've survived your first roundup. Then we'll see if you still want to stay. Roundup began on Monday morning with gray light barely touching the sky. Eleanor had coffee ready at 4 o'clock as promised, along with a breakfast substantial enough to sustain men through hours of hard riding. William came in with Franklin and the boys. Carlos already focused. Jimmy looking half asleep. Franklin moving with the deliberate efficiency of long experience. They ate quickly, barely speaking. Tension was evident in the set of their shoulders. This work was dangerous. Cattle could turn aggressive. Horses could bolt or stumble. Men could get kicked, trampled, crushed against fence posts. Every year Roundup claimed injuries and sometimes lives across the territory. We'll work the north section first, William said, draining his coffee. Eleanor expect us back around 2 for midday meal. If we're not back by 3, ride out and check. We'll be at Box Canyon where the creek bends. Understood. He paused at the door, looking back at her. You have the rifle in the kitchen. Loaded. Safety on. Keep it close. Anyone comes around you don't know, you get inside and bar the door. I will. Then they were gone, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the pre-dawn darkness. Eleanor stood in the suddenly quiet kitchen listening to the house settle around her. Then she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The day fell into a rhythm of its own. She prepared the midday meal. Stew that could be kept warm. Bread, dried fruit, water jugs to keep them hydrated in the heat. At noon she loaded everything into panniers, saddled one of the gentler horses, and rode out to the north section. She found them in controlled chaos. Cattle milled in temporary pens constructed from rope and posts. William was on horseback cutting specific animals from the herd with practiced precision. Franklin supervised the branding where Carlos and Jimmy worked with heated irons, moving quickly to minimize the animal's distress. Dust rose in clouds. The air smelled of smoke and sweat and cattle. William saw her approaching and rode to meet her. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his face streaked with dust, but his eyes were sharp and alert. Food's here, Eleanor called. Where do you want it? Under those cottonwoods. We'll take turns, keep the rotation going. He swung down from his horse, moving with the stiffness of someone who had been in the saddle for 8 hours straight. Any problems at the house? None. Everything's fine. He nodded already, turning back to the work. But then he paused. This is good. Having you ride out. We'd have lost another hour if we had to go back to the house. It was not effusive praise, but from William Brennan it might as well have been a speech. Eleanor spent the afternoon rotating between house and range, keeping supplies flowing, checking on the horses they had left behind, preparing the evening meal. When the men finally came in at dusk, they were filthy, exhausted, and starving. She had heated water for washing, set out clean towels, and had food ready the moment they sat down. They ate like men who had forgotten what hunger felt like. Silent, except for the sounds of appreciation. When William reached for thirds, Franklin caught Eleanor's eye and winked. Best roundup I've been on, Carlos said quietly. Usually we're eating cold beans and fighting over the last hard biscuit. Usually we're too tired to care. Jimmy added his young face, showing the strain of the day's work. William said nothing, but when he stood to leave, he paused by Eleanor's chair. His hand landed briefly on her shoulder. Just a moment of contact, warm and calloused through the fabric of her dress. Tomorrow starts at 4 again. I'll be ready. Then he was gone, and Eleanor sat very still, her shoulder tingling where he had touched her. The days blurred together. Up before dawn, coffee and breakfast ready, supplies organized, horses checked and fed. Ride out at midday with food and fresh water. Return to prepare evening meals and set up for the next morning. Fall into bed exhausted, wake to do it all again. On the fourth day, Jimmy got kicked by a spooked heifer. He came in pale and shaking, holding his ribs, trying not to show how much it hurt. Eleanor had him sit still while she checked for breaks, her hands gentle but thorough. "Nothing broken," she said finally. "But you're badly bruised. You'll need to rest." "Can't rest," Jimmy protested. "We're not done. You'll rest," William said from the doorway, his voice allowing no argument. "One injured man's better than one dead fool who tried to work through cracked ribs." Eleanor prepared a poultice and wrapped Jimmy's torso, then sent him to the bunkhouse with instructions to stay still and call if the pain got worse. That night she checked on him twice, bringing soup and making sure he was comfortable. "You didn't have to do this," Jimmy said, young and grateful. "I mean, we're just hired hands." "You're people doing hard work," Eleanor replied. "That means you deserve to be taken care of when you're hurt." Word spread. The next day, when Eleanor rode out with the midday meal, the men's greetings were warmer, more respectful. Carlos offered to handle her horse. Franklin made sure she got the shady spot to rest. Even William seemed less guarded, answering her questions about the work, explaining what they were doing and why. On the sixth day, they discovered a problem. 3 steers had broken through a fence in the night and disappeared into the rough country to the west. William stood at the gap in the fence line, frustration evident in every line of his body. "We can't afford to lose them," he said, "but we can't spare the time to track them either. We're already behind schedule." "I'll go," Eleanor said. Every head turned to stare at her. "Absolutely not," William said flatly. "That's rough country. Easy to get lost. And if you catch up to them, you can't handle 3 full-grown steers alone." "I won't try to handle them. I'll find them, mark their location, and come back. Then you can send Franklin or Carlos when there's time." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm a good tracker, William. And you need every working hand here. Let me help. It's dangerous. So is wasting time looking for me if I don't come back. I'll take the rifle, leave clear trail markers, and if I'm not back by nightfall, you'll know exactly where to find me." William's jaw worked. She could see the battle in his eyes, the need for help versus the instinct to protect, the practical answer fighting with something deeper. "I'll go with her," Franklin said. "We'll track together." The please did it. Thomas closed his eyes briefly. Be back before dark. But Eleanor shook her head. "You're needed here. The branding can't continue without your supervision. I can do this alone, William. Trust me." The please did it. Thomas closed his eyes briefly, then nodded once. "You're back by sunset. Not a minute later. You see any sign of trouble? Men, wolves, anything, you come straight back. The cattle aren't worth your life." "Understood." She left within the hour, riding a steady mare named Daisy, rifle secured in the saddle holster, supplies packed carefully. The trail was easy to follow at first. Broken branches, trampled grass, fresh droppings. The steers had gone west toward rougher country, following what looked like an old game trail. Eleanor tracked steadily, marking her route with stones and broken branches, making sure anyone who followed could find her path. The sun climbed higher, heating the air until it shimmered. She stopped twice to rest the horse and check her bearings, using landmarks to fix her position in her mind. By mid-afternoon she found them. 3 steers grazing in a small valley, completely unconcerned about being lost. Eleanor circled carefully, noting escape routes, water sources, anything that would help when the men came back to collect them. She built a cairn of stones on the ridge overlooking the valley, clear enough to be seen from a distance, and marked the trail back with strips of cloth tied to branches. Then she turned Daisy toward home and let the mare set the pace. The sun was touching the western mountains when the ranch came into view. Eleanor could see figures near the barn. William pacing, Franklin watching the horizon, Carlos holding horses ready. The moment they spotted her, William swung into his saddle and rode out to meet her. He reached her a quarter mile from the house, pulling his horse alongside hers with barely controlled intensity. "You found them. Small valley 3 miles west. I marked the location." Eleanor handed him the rough map she had drawn. Water source here. Best approach from the North Ridge. You could collect them tomorrow morning. 2 men. Shouldn't take more than a few hours. William took the map, his eyes scanning it quickly. Then he looked at her. Really looked, taking in her dusty clothes, wind-tangled hair, sun-flushed face. You did good. 3 words. But the way he said them with something like respect, warming his usually guarded voice, made Eleanor feel like she had won a victory far larger than finding 3 lost steers. They rode back together in comfortable silence, the horses tired the day, fading into that golden hour when everything seemed possible. When they reached the barn, Franklin was waiting with an expression that tried for stern but could not hide his approval. Heard you tracked those steers clean and clear, ma'am. That's fine work. Just following broken branches and common sense. That's more than most would manage in rough country. Franklin's eyes were kind. Boss's mother could track like that. Seems you got the same skills. William dismounted and came to help Eleanor down. His hands caught her waist steady and sure, and for a moment they stood close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, smell the dust and leather and sweat that clung to him. His blue-green eyes held hers, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement, maybe. Appreciation. The beginning of something neither of them had names for yet. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for taking the risk, for trusting yourself, for coming back safe. Always." Eleanor replied. Then before she could think better of it, "Someone has to make sure you eat properly." He almost smiled. Actually, almost smiled, his mouth quirking at the corner. Can't argue with that. The roundup ended 2 days later with all the cattle accounted for, branded and sorted for market or winter keeping. The men were exhausted but satisfied, moving with the loose-limbed relief of hard work successfully completed. That last evening, Eleanor cooked a celebration meal. Roasted beef vegetables from the garden that had started producing fresh bread, even a dried apple pie she had made with precious sugar and cinnamon. They ate in the kitchen, all 5 of them crowded around the table, and for the first time since Eleanor had arrived, the house felt like a home. Franklin told stories about past roundups. Carlos shared tales of his childhood in Mexico. Jimmy blushed and stammered through a joke that was not very funny, but made everyone laugh anyway. And William sat at the head of the table, still mostly quiet, but with his shoulders relaxed and his eyes less guarded. When the men finally left for the bunkhouse full and content, William helped Eleanor clean up. They worked in companionable silence, washing and drying, putting things away with the ease of practiced routine. "You were right," William said as he hung up the last dish towel, "about staying through roundup. We wouldn't have managed nearly as well without you." Eleanor wiped down the table, pleased, but trying not to show it too obviously. "Does that mean you'll stop trying to send me to town every time things get busy?" "Maybe." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying her. 3 months is almost half over. You've more than worked off the debt. If you wanted to leave early, I wouldn't hold you to the contract." Her hands stilled. Was he asking her to go or giving her permission to stay? "Do you want me to leave? I want you to have a choice." His voice was careful. "You came here because you had to, because of your sister's debt. That obligation satisfied. So if you're staying now, it should be because you want to, not because you think you have to." Eleanor set down her cloth and turned to face him fully. This was the moment she realized. The moment to be honest about what she wanted, even if she was not entirely sure what that was herself. "I don't have grand prospects waiting elsewhere," she said slowly. "No family eager to take me in. No brilliant opportunities in Philadelphia. I'm 26, plain practical, and according to Mrs. Caldwell, well past my prime. But here," she gestured around the clean kitchen toward the house that had become familiar. "Here I'm useful. The work matters. And maybe it's foolish, but I've started to feel like this place needs me, like I belong here in a way I never belonged anywhere else." William was quiet for a long moment. Then, "It's not foolish, and you do belong here. You've made this house feel—" He struggled for words. "Like it's supposed to feel. Like when my mother was alive and things were good. I didn't realize how much I'd let slip until you came and fixed it, so I can stay. Past the 3 months if you want to. He pushed off the counter, moving closer. "But Eleanor, you should know. People will talk. Mrs. Caldwell and her friends, they'll say things about you living here unmarried, just the two of us. It'll get ugly. It's already ugly. Mrs. Caldwell made sure of that weeks ago. It'll get worse." His eyes were serious. "I can offer you a place here, employment, a home. But I can't offer you respectability. Not unless—" He stopped, shook his head. "Never mind. Unless what? Unless we actually get married." The words came out rough, almost angry. "Make it legal. Give you a real position here, not just as hired help." It'd stop the gossip. "Give you security." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "Are you proposing I'm offering a practical solution to a social problem?" William's voice was flat, carefully emptied of emotion. "You need a place. I need help running this ranch. A legal marriage would solve both problems and shut up the gossips. It doesn't have to be. It wouldn't have to be a real marriage, just a legal arrangement. You'd have your own room, your independence. Just with the protection of my name." It should have hurt. This cold, practical proposal devoid of any warmth or feeling. But Eleanor found she was not hurt. Instead, she felt something like understanding. William Brennan did not know how to offer softness, did not know how to speak of feelings if he even had them, but he knew how to offer protection, security, a place to stand. "And what would you get out of it?" she asked quietly. "Besides a clean house and regular meals?" His eyes met hers, and for just a moment his guard slipped. She saw loneliness there, bone-deep and aching. The isolation of years spent building something alone with no one to share it with. The exhaustion of being strong all the time because there was no one else to be strong for him. "I'd get a partner," he said simply. "Someone who understands this life, who doesn't expect more than I can give, but who's willing to build something anyway. That's worth more than you might think." Eleanor considered it. A marriage of convenience, a practical arrangement. Nothing like the romance young girls dreamed of. Nothing like what Violet had found with her banker's son. But maybe, just maybe, it was something better. Something real, built on mutual respect and honest need rather than fleeting passion. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "Can I have time to think about it?" Relief and disappointment warred in his expression. "Of course. Take all the time you need. The offer stands whenever you're ready. Or not. Whatever you decide." He left then, his boots heavy on the stairs, leaving Eleanor alone in the warm kitchen with a proposal that was not quite a proposal and a future suddenly full of possibilities she had never imagined. She did not sleep that night. Instead, she sat by her window watching the stars wheel slowly across the vast Montana sky and thought about what it meant to choose a life rather than simply endure one. The wind carried the scent of grass and cattle and distant mountains. Somewhere, an owl called. The house settled around her with familiar creaks. This place, this ranch, this hard, lonely man who had offered her not love, but something perhaps more lasting. Partnership, respect, a place to stand and work worth doing. As dawn broke golden over the eastern pastures, Eleanor made her decision. She found William in the barn at sunrise, already working, though the roundup had ended just yesterday. He was mending tack with steady, methodical movements, his hands sure despite the early hour. He looked up when her shadow fell across the doorway, and something in his eyes told her he had been expecting this. "I have an answer," Eleanor said, stepping inside. The barn smelled of hay and leather and horses familiar now as her own skin. "About your proposal." William set down the bridle he had been working on, his expression carefully neutral. "All right. I'll marry you. On 2 conditions." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Conditions. First, I want it understood that I'm not doing this out of desperation or because I have no other choice. I'm choosing this. Choosing you, this ranch, this life. That matters to me. Understood." And the second, Eleanor moved closer, near enough to see the morning stubble on his jaw, the way his pulse beat at his throat. "If somewhere down the line this arrangement becomes something more than practical, we're both honest about it. I won't spend years wondering what you're thinking or feeling, and I won't hide what I'm feeling either. We may be starting this as a business arrangement, but if it changes, we face that honestly." "Agreed." Something flickered in William's eyes. Surprise, maybe. Respect. He extended his hand. Agreed. She took it, his palm warm and calloused against hers, and they shook on it like partners sealing a cattle deal. Practical, businesslike. And yet Eleanor felt the weight of it, this promise made in a barn at sunrise, binding her life to his in ways neither of them could yet predict. "We'll go to town tomorrow," William said. "Get the license. Find someone to perform the ceremony. Keep it simple. Simple is fine." Eleanor released his hand, already thinking ahead. "Should we tell Franklin and the others tonight at supper? They should hear it from us before the town does." He picked up the bridle again, but his movements were less certain now. "Eleanor, about the sleeping arrangements. I meant what I said. Separate rooms. When and if that changes, we'll discuss it like adults. I'll keep the upstairs room. You'll keep yours." She kept her voice steady, matter of fact. "When and if that changes, we'll discuss it like adults. Is there anything else we need to settle?" "Just one thing." William set the bridle down again and faced her fully. "This might not be a love match, but I'll be faithful to you. To the vows we make. I want you to know that. I'm not the kind of man who breaks his word even in an arrangement like this." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. "I believe you, and I'll be faithful too, in all ways that matter." They stood there in the quiet barn, two practical people who had agreed to build something together without quite naming what that something might become. Then William nodded once, picked up his tools, and went back to work. And Eleanor returned to the house to begin preparing for a wedding that would be everything hers and nothing like she had once imagined. That evening she told Franklin and the ranch hands over supper. There was a moment of surprised silence. Then Franklin's weathered face broke into a genuine smile. "Well, I'll be. About time the boss made an honest woman of you, ma'am." He caught William's warning look and cleared his throat. "That is congratulations to you both. This is good news, real good news. The ranch needs a lady," Carlos added warmly. "Needs both of you." Jimmy just blushed and stammered something that might have been congratulations or might have been a question about biscuits. Eleanor chose to interpret it as the former and thanked him kindly. After the men left, William walked Eleanor to the base of the stairs. They stood in the dim hallway, suddenly awkward with each other in a way they had not been that morning. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Last chance to change your mind." "I'm sure." "Are you?" "Haven't been sure about much in my life, but this feels right. You feel right here." He cleared his throat. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be long." Eleanor climbed the stairs to her room, her heart beating faster than the simple words warranted. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. William Brennan. Tomorrow she would bind her life legally and publicly to a man she had known less than 2 months. Tomorrow everything would change, and yet somehow nothing would change at all. She did not sleep well that night either. The trip to town the next morning was quiet. William drove the wagon with his usual competence, and Eleanor sat beside him wearing the green dress, her hair pinned carefully, trying not to think about Mrs. Caldwell's inevitable reaction. They obtained the license with minimal fuss. The clerk raised his eyebrows but said nothing. Then William led her to a small church at the edge of town. The minister was an elderly man with kind eyes and a practical manner that put Eleanor at ease. He asked few questions, seemed unsurprised by the hasty wedding, and performed the ceremony with simple dignity. Franklin had ridden in as witness, standing solid and approving in his Sunday coat. There were no flowers, no music, no guests beyond Franklin and the minister's wife, who appeared to serve as second witness. William spoke his vows in a steady voice, promising to honor and protect. Eleanor spoke hers with equal steadiness, promising to stand beside him through whatever came. The words were traditional, weighted with meanings they had not yet earned, but perhaps would grow into. When the minister pronounced them married, William kissed her cheek. Brief, formal, proper. And that was that. Eleanor Hayes became Eleanor Brennan in a ceremony that took less than 10 minutes. They were walking out of the church when Mrs. Caldwell appeared on the street. Her sharp eyes took in Eleanor's dress, William's formal posture, Franklin's presence, her mouth compressed into a thin line. "Well," she said, her voice carrying, "I see congratulations are in order. How wonderfully convenient for you, Miss Hayes. Or should I say Mrs. Brennan now? Mrs. Brennan is correct. William said, his voice cool. My wife and I have business to attend to, if you'll excuse us. He offered Eleanor his arm the first time he had done so, and she took it, lifting her chin as they walked past Mrs. Caldwell and her gathering audience. She could feel their eyes, hear the whispers starting. The gossip would spread like wildfire. The mail-order bride who came under false pretenses had managed to trap the lonely rancher after all. Let them talk. She was Mrs. William Brennan now, legal and proper, and no amount of gossip could change that. They stopped at the general store for supplies, and the storekeeper offered tentative congratulations. At the feed store, the owner shook William's hand and welcomed Eleanor formally. Word was spreading fast, but it was done now, sealed and settled. On the ride home, William finally spoke. I'm sorry about Mrs. Caldwell. She'll make this harder than it needs to be. She was always going to make it hard. This way at least she can't claim I'm living in sin or taking advantage of your charity. Eleanor watched the familiar landscape roll past. We did the right thing, William. The practical thing. Practical. He repeated something unreadable in his tone. Yeah, that's what this is. The first week of marriage was strange in its lack of strangeness. They fell back into their established routines as if nothing had changed. William rose early, worked long days, came in for meals. Eleanor prepared. She managed the house, tended the garden, handled the accounts. They were polite to each other, careful dancing around the fact that they now shared a legal bond and a name, but little else. At night they retreated to their separate rooms. Eleanor would lie awake, hearing William moving around downstairs or on the other side of the house, and wonder if he was thinking about her. Wonder if this distant politeness was all their marriage would ever be. September faded into October. The weather turned cooler, the leaves on the cottonwoods going gold. William began preparing for winter, repairing the barn, checking fences, moving cattle to lower pastures. Eleanor preserved vegetables, mended clothes, made sure the house was ready for the cold months ahead. They were settling into this new normal when a rider arrived at the ranch. Not a stranger, but someone Eleanor recognized from town. Young Michael, who worked at the telegraph office, looking apologetic and determined. "Telegram for you, Mr. Brennan," he said, handing over the paper. "Came through this afternoon. Seemed important." William read it while Eleanor waited, her heart sinking as she watched his expression harden. When he looked up, his eyes were troubled. "It's from James, my brother. He's in San Francisco. Says his business venture failed. He's asking for more money." William stopped, his jaw working. "Says Margaret left him. Took the boys. He's asking to come back here, permanently this time. Says he'll work, earn his keep. Says he's learned his lesson." Eleanor's first instinct was to say no. Absolutely not. They had built something precious here, and James had already proven he would poison it with his presence. But she saw the conflict in William's face, the old guilt, the sense of family obligation warring with protective instinct. "What do you want to do?" she asked carefully. "I don't know. He's my brother. My only living family besides you and the baby we might have someday. But last time he was here he made you miserable. Made us both miserable." William crumpled the telegram in his fist. "I won't put you through that again, Eleanor. I won't choose him over you. That's already decided. Then what's the conflict?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the crumpled paper. "What if he really has changed? What if he genuinely needs help, and I turn him away? Will I regret it later?" Eleanor moved to stand beside him, her hand on his arm. "William, you can't save someone who won't save themselves. James has made choices. Bad choices repeatedly. Giving him more chances won't fix him if he's not willing to do the hard work of changing. And you have other responsibilities now. A wife who's about to have your child someday. A ranch that needs you. Those come first. So I should say no. I think you should do what you believe is right. But know this, if you say yes, if you let him come back, there will be conditions. He works like everyone else. He treats us with respect. And at the first sign that he's fallen back into old patterns, he leaves. No second chances this time." William looked at her with something like relief in his eyes. When did you get so wise? I married you, didn't I? That required considerable wisdom. She smiled to soften the words. Whatever you decide, I'll support, but I won't let him hurt you again, or our family. The response William sent was careful and clear. James could come, but as a ranch hand, not as family seeking charity. He would work for his keep, follow the rules, and earn his place through actions rather than blood. If he could not accept those terms, he should look elsewhere. The reply came a week later. James agreed to the conditions. He would arrive in late November. Eleanor felt uneasy about it, but she trusted William's judgment, and perhaps in some small way she understood James's desperation. She had been desperate once too, traveling west as the wrong sister with no prospects and no home. Sometimes people needed a second chance. The question was whether James would use this one better than the first. November arrived cold and unforgiving. Eleanor was enormous now, uncomfortable and tired, but still managing the household with determined efficiency. William had become almost comically protective, refusing to let her lift anything heavier than a plate, insisting she rest more, worrying constantly about her health. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she told him one morning when he tried to stop her from carrying a basket of mending. "Women do this all the time." "Not my woman," he replied stubbornly. "Carlos can handle that. Carlos is handling the horses. I'm handling the mending. Eleanor, you need to trust that I know my limits." They stared at each other, both stubborn, until finally William sighed. "I just worry. Can't help it. I know. And I love you for it. But you need to let me work within reason. I'll go crazy sitting idle all day. How about this? I promise to ask for help when I need it, and you promise not to treat me like I'm breakable. Deal. Deal. Though I reserve the right to worry excessively." James arrived on a bitterly cold afternoon in late November, looking nothing like the confident man who had left 6 months earlier. He was thinner, his clothes shabby, his charming smile subdued by genuine hardship. He climbed down from the hired wagon with his single bag and faced William with something almost like humility. "Thank you for this chance," he said quietly. "I know I don't deserve it." "You don't," William agreed. "But you're getting it anyway. One chance, James. Don't waste it." "I won't. I swear I won't." Eleanor watched from the porch, one hand on her swollen belly, assessing this version of James. He met her eyes and had the grace to look ashamed. "Mrs. Brennan, I owe you an apology for how Margaret and I behaved when we were here before, for the things we said, the disrespect we showed. You didn't deserve any of it." "No, I didn't," Eleanor agreed. "But if you're genuinely sorry and genuinely willing to change, we can move past it. This ranch runs on hard work and mutual respect. Can you give both?" "Yes, ma'am." "I can. Then welcome back. Your brother will show you to the bunkhouse and explain your duties. Supper's at 6. James proved true to his word in a way that surprised everyone. He worked hard, harder than Eleanor had thought him capable of. Up before dawn in the saddle all day, falling into his bunk, exhausted each night. He did not complain, did not make excuses, did not try to trade on family connection for easier treatment. Franklin, skeptical at first, gradually admitted that James might actually be serious about changing. "He's learning," the foreman said one evening. "Still makes mistakes, but he listens when you correct him. That's more than I expected." William watched his brother with careful assessment, not quite trusting, but willing to give genuine effort its due. And slowly, carefully, something like respect began to build between them. It was a Sunday afternoon in March when James found Eleanor in the kitchen, baby Rosie fussing in her arms. Eleanor was exhausted, the baby colicky, and refusing to settle. "May I?" James asked, hesitant at the doorway. Eleanor, desperate, nodded. James took Rosie with surprising gentleness, cradling her against his chest. He began to hum a low melody Eleanor did not recognize. "My boys loved this song," James said softly, swaying slightly. "David especially. He'd fuss just like this, and Margaret would get so frustrated. But I'd sing and he'd settle." Rosie's cries quieted to whimpers, then stopped entirely. She stared up at James with wide eyes. "You miss them," Eleanor said. It was not a question. Every day. James's voice was thick. I was a terrible father. Always chasing the next opportunity, never present. I thought providing money was enough. I was wrong about everything. You can write to them. Let them know you've changed. Margaret won't let me near them, and maybe that's what I deserve. He looked down at Rosie, who had fallen asleep against his shoulder. But maybe I can be better next time, if I ever get another chance. William appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene. James holding his niece with such tender care. For a moment something passed between the brothers. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. She likes you, William said simply. She doesn't know any better yet, James replied. But he smiled, and it was not the charming, calculated smile of before. It was real, sad, hopeful. Not the closeness of brothers who had grown up together, but the solid regard of men who worked side by side toward common goals. Winter settled over Montana with teeth bared. Snow piled high against the barn. Temperatures dropped so low the well water froze despite their best efforts. William and the ranch hands worked from dawn to dusk, keeping the cattle alive, breaking ice on water troughs, hauling feed through snowdrifts that reached their waists. Eleanor kept the house warm, the meals hot, and the coffee strong. And when William came in each night half frozen and exhausted, she had hot water ready for washing and hands ready to ease the ache from his shoulders. They were happy. It was a quiet happiness built on small moments and shared work, but it was real and growing stronger with each day. But as Eleanor knew too well, happiness was never guaranteed to last. The storm that would test everything they had built was coming, and when it arrived it would force them both to decide what truly mattered and how much they were willing to risk to keep it. The storm came with unexpected violence, rolling in from the mountains like God's own fury. Wind screamed around the house, driving snow horizontally, reducing visibility to nothing. Eleanor stood at the kitchen window, watching the white chaos outside, worry gnawing at her stomach. William had been checking the cattle in the far pasture and was not back yet. It had been 3 hours. He should have been back 2 hours ago. Franklin appeared at the kitchen door, snow-covered and grim. "Boss isn't back yet. I'm going out to look for him. I'll come with you." "Ma'am, you can't go out in this. He's my husband." Eleanor was already pulling on her heavy coat, wrapping a scarf around her face. "And I'm a good tracker, remember? You need my help." Franklin hesitated, then nodded. The concern in his eyes told Eleanor everything about how serious this was. They saddled horses in the barn, the wind howling through every crack, and rode out into the storm. The world was white chaos. Eleanor could barely see Franklin 3 feet ahead of her, could hardly hear anything over the wind's roar. But she kept her mare steady, following Franklin's lead, watching for any sign of William or his horse. They found him a mile out, dismounted beside his downed horse. The animal had stepped in a hidden hole and gone lame, and William had been trying to walk them both home when the storm worsened. He was half frozen, his lips blue, his movements sluggish. "Eleanor." He stared at her like she was a mirage. "What are you doing out here, looking for you, you stubborn fool?" She was off her horse in seconds, wrapping her coat around him. "Can you ride? Horse is lame. Can't leave him. Franklin will handle the horse. You're coming with me now." Between them, they got William onto Eleanor's mare. She swung up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist to keep him steady, and Franklin led them back through the blinding snow. William leaned back against her, shivering violently, his weight familiar even through the layers of winter clothing. "Shouldn't have come out here," he muttered. "Dangerous. More dangerous for you to freeze to death." Eleanor held him tighter. "I told you I'm your partner. That means I come for you when you need me." "Partnership." He said the word slurred with cold. "Right. That's what we are, among other things," Eleanor replied, and felt him shudder with what might have been laughter or just more shivers. They got him into the house, stripped off his frozen clothes, wrapped him in blankets by the fire. Eleanor heated water for tea, made him drink it despite his protests, checked his fingers and toes for frostbite. Franklin handled the horses and went to check on the lame one, leaving them alone in the warm kitchen. William watched Eleanor move around the room, his eyes tracking her with an intensity that had nothing to do with cold. Color was returning to his face, the shivering stopping. "You rode out into a blizzard for me. Of course I did. Could have gotten lost, frozen, died out there. But I didn't. I had you to find. That was enough. His fingers tightened on the blanket. Eleanor, I need to tell you something. Been trying to figure out how to say it, but I'm too cold and tired to be clever about it. He took a shaky breath. This arrangement we made, the practical marriage, the business partnership, it's not enough anymore. Not for me. Her heart stuttered. What do you mean? I wake up thinking about you. Wonder what you're doing when we're apart. Look for excuses to be near you. When you rode out into that storm, all I could think was if something happened to you, I'd... His voice broke. I can't call this just practical anymore. It's real. You're real to me. And I don't know when it happened, but somewhere between you arriving on that train platform and riding into a blizzard to save me, I fell in love with my wife. The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Eleanor stared at him, at this hard, lonely man who had just offered her his heart with the same straightforward practicality he had offered everything else. I thought we agreed to be honest if things changed, she said finally, her voice shaking. I'm being honest now. His eyes held hers. Question is, has it changed for you too? Or am I alone in this? Eleanor thought of the past months. The gradual softening between them, the easy partnership, the way her day felt incomplete until he walked through the door, the pride she felt in their shared work, the comfort of his rare smiles, the warmth that spread through her chest whenever he looked at her like she mattered. She had come here expecting nothing, had agreed to marry him for practical reasons. Mutual benefit, simple survival. But somehow, without noticing exactly when or how practical, had become personal. Partnership had become something deeper. The wrong bride had become exactly the right woman, and the lonely rancher had become the man she could not imagine living without. You're not alone, she whispered. I love you too. I think I have for weeks now, but I was afraid to say it. Afraid you'd think I was trying to turn our arrangement into something you never wanted. William made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob and pulled her into his arms, despite the blankets, despite his lingering chill. I want it. Want you. Want everything we could be together. Not just the practical parts. His lips found her hair, her temple, her cheek. Stay with me, Eleanor. Not because of debts or contracts or convenience. Stay because you choose this. Choose us. I already did, she said against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her cheek. The morning I agreed to marry you, I just didn't know it yet. They held each other while the storm raged outside and the fire crackled and the house that had been just a structure became truly a home. When William's shivering finally stopped, when warmth returned to his hands and color to his face, he tipped her chin up and kissed her properly. Not the formal peck from their wedding, but a real kiss, tender and seeking and full of promise. About those sleeping arrangements, Eleanor murmured against his lips. Yes, I think it's time we discussed changing them. William smiled. Truly smiled, warm and genuine, and transforming his whole face. Best discussion we've had yet. That night changed everything and nothing. William moved his belongings into Eleanor's room, the larger of the two, with the window facing the mountains he loved. And they began their marriage in truth, discovering each other with the same patient practicality that had built everything else between them. But the ranch work continued, the routines remained. And to Franklin's knowing eye, the only real difference was the way William touched Eleanor's shoulder when he passed her in the kitchen, the way she leaned into him at the supper table, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. Winter deepened its grip on Montana. January brought temperatures so brutal that even the hardened ranch hands complained. William and Franklin worked constantly to keep the cattle alive, breaking ice, hauling feed, checking for signs of frostbite or illness. Eleanor kept the house warm, the meals hot, and when William came in each night half frozen and exhausted, she had everything ready to ease him back to warmth. They were happy. It was a quiet happiness, built on small moments and shared work, but it was real and growing stronger with each day. It was in late January that Eleanor realized her monthly courses were late. She sat at the kitchen table long after William had gone to bed, her hand pressed to her still flat stomach, counting days in her head. 2 weeks late, maybe 3. She had been so busy managing the household through James's arrival and the demands of winter that she had not noticed until now. A baby. She might be carrying William's child. The thought filled her with equal parts joy and terror. They had been married only 4 months together as true husband and wife for less than half that. Was it too soon? But then nothing about their relationship had followed conventional timing. They had built everything backward. Marriage before courtship, partnership before love, choosing each other after already being bound together. She decided to wait before telling William. Wait until she was certain, until she could present it as fact rather than possibility. She had learned early in their marriage that William preferred concrete information he could act on rather than speculation that left him uncertain. But keeping the secret proved harder than she had anticipated. William knew her too well, now noticed the small changes she could not quite hide. The way she avoided coffee in the mornings, how certain smells made her nauseous, the extra care she took not to lift heavy things. 2 weeks later, he found her in the pantry leaning against the wall with her eyes closed, fighting a wave of sickness. "Eleanor." His voice was careful. "You all right, fine. Just a bit dizzy." He moved closer, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "You've been dizzy a lot lately. And tired. And you barely ate breakfast this morning." He paused, and she could feel his gaze on her face. "Are you sick? Should I send for the doctor?" "No, doctor." Eleanor opened her eyes and met his worried look. "I'm not sick, William. At least not the way you mean." Understanding dawned slowly in his expression, followed by something that looked like wonder mixed with fear. Are we? "I think so. I'm not entirely certain yet, but all the signs point to it." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "I was going to wait to tell you until I was sure, but you're too observant for your own good." William stood very still, his large hand spanning her middle, his eyes fixed on where his palm rested. "A baby. Our baby. Are you pleased I know it soon and we've only just settled things with your brother and winter's not even over?" He kissed her, stopping the flow of anxious words. When he pulled back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "I'm terrified and thrilled and completely unprepared. But yes, Eleanor, I'm pleased. More than pleased. Even though it's happening so fast, everything with us has happened fast. Why should this be different?" He pulled her close, careful now in a way he had not been before. "We'll figure it out, same as we figured out everything else. Together." That night, lying in bed with William's hand resting protectively on her stomach, Eleanor felt the last piece of her new life click into place. She had come here as the wrong sister, the mistake, the burden. But she was building something right. A marriage, a home, a family. Something real and lasting and entirely her own. Spring came late to Montana that year, but when it finally arrived, it transformed the brown landscape to green almost overnight. The cattle moved to the high pastures, sleek and healthy, after surviving the brutal winter. William and Franklin began planning for the summer work, branding new calves, repairing fences, preparing for the fall market. Eleanor prepared for a different kind of work. She sewed baby clothes from soft fabric, gathered supplies for the birth, turned one corner of their bedroom into a nursery space. Her body changed daily now, growing round and full, and she felt the baby move. Small flutters at first, then stronger kicks that made William's eyes go wide with wonder when he felt them. "That's our child," he would say, his hand on her belly, his voice filled with awe. "Really real, a whole person growing right here, a whole person who's going to be as stubborn as both of us combined." Eleanor replied, "We're going to have our hands full." "Good. I like having my hands full. Keeps things interesting." James had proven himself over the winter months in ways that surprised everyone. He worked hard, pulled his weight, and slowly earned the respect of Franklin and the other hands. The brothers were not close, but they had found a working relationship built on mutual respect rather than blood obligation. One evening in late May, James approached William and Eleanor on the porch where they sat watching the sunset. "I need to talk to you both." He said, his expression serious. They made room for him, and James sat looking out at the land he had helped tend through the long winter. "I've saved enough money from my wages," he said quietly. "I'm heading to Denver. Got an honest job offer there. Bookkeeping. Going to rebuild my life properly this time." William studied his brother's face. "You sure about this, I'm sure. I came here broken and you gave me a chance to put myself back together. But I need to stand on my own now. Prove to myself that I can make it without leaning on family." James turned to Eleanor. "You saved me as much as you saved this ranch, showed me what real strength looks like." Eleanor felt her throat tighten. "We're glad we could help." James pulled out a sealed letter. "If anything happens to me, please give this to David and Samuel someday. Tell them their father finally became someone worth knowing. We will." Eleanor accepted the letter carefully. The goodbye the next morning was not emotional, but it was respectful. James shook William's hand, hugged Eleanor gently, mindful of her pregnancy, and climbed onto the wagon that would take him to the stagecoach. "Think he'll make it this time?" William asked as they watched him go. "I think he has a chance," Eleanor replied. "That's all anyone gets." Summer brought heat and Eleanor's final weeks of pregnancy. She moved slowly now, heavy and uncomfortable, counting the days until the baby would come. Dr. Patterson had warned it could be any time, and William arranged for Sarah Mitchell, the storekeeper's wife, who had become a friend, to come stay at the ranch when Eleanor's time grew near. But the baby had other plans. On a sweltering evening in mid-July, 3 weeks before her due date, Eleanor had been feeling odd all day, restless, unable to settle. When the first real contraction hit, she knew immediately what it meant. "William." She called, her voice steady despite the pain. "It's time." The next hours were a blur. Sarah arrived quickly, calm and competent. Dr. Patterson came from town, his face serious as he examined Eleanor. The baby's heartbeat was slower than ideal, the position not optimal for delivery. "We may need to induce labor early," the doctor said. "If the baby's in distress, waiting could be dangerous. Whatever keeps them both safe." William said immediately, his face pale with fear. "Whatever you need to do." They tried natural methods first. Eleanor walked, trying to encourage labor. Hours passed. The baby still was not moving much, and Eleanor felt fear creeping in around the edges of her determination. "What if something's wrong?" she whispered to William during a brief moment alone. "What if I lose?" She could not finish the sentence. "You won't." William held her hands, his grip firm. "You're the strongest person I know. You survived Philadelphia, poverty, Montana winters, my difficult family. You'll survive this too, and I'll be right here." Late afternoon, the first real contraction finally hit. Eleanor gasped, grabbing William's hand. Sarah moved efficiently, getting Eleanor to the bedroom, preparing everything they would need. The labor was long and difficult. After several hours, Dr. Patterson's face grew grave. The baby's stuck. Positions wrong. He would need to turn the baby manually, a procedure that was extremely painful and carried risks. "Do it," Eleanor said through gritted teeth. "Whatever it takes." The pain was unlike anything she had experienced. She gripped William's hand so hard she feared she might break it. The room swam in and out of focus. Dr. Patterson's voice came from somewhere far away, calm but urgent. "Mrs. Brennan, I need you to stay with me. The baby's heart rate is dropping. We need to act now." William's face was white, his eyes wide with a terror she had never seen before. This man who faced blizzards and broke horses and worked through pain was helpless here, watching her suffer and unable to do anything but hold her hand. "I can't," Eleanor gasped. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can." Sarah's voice was firm, steady. "You're the strongest woman I know. You rode into a blizzard, you faced down Mrs. Caldwell, you built a home from nothing. You can do this." Dr. Patterson positioned himself, his experienced hands gentle despite the urgency. "On my count, Eleanor. 3, 2, 1. The procedure to turn the baby was agony. Eleanor heard herself scream a sound she did not recognize as her own. William's tears fell on her face, hot and desperate. "Almost there," Dr. Patterson murmured. "Almost." A shift. A release. Suddenly the pressure changed. "That's it." The doctor's relief was palpable. The baby's in position. Now, Eleanor, on the next contraction you push. You push with everything you have left." William held her tears streaming down his face while Sarah wiped her forehead and murmured encouragement. Finally, mercifully, the baby shifted into the correct position. "Now we can deliver," Dr. Patterson said. "On the next contraction, push with everything you have." Eleanor was exhausted, but she found reserves of strength she had not known she possessed. The sun was setting outside their window, painting the mountains gold and red, when she made one final enormous effort. A baby's cry split the air. "It's a girl," Dr. Patterson announced. "Healthy lungs, all fingers and toes accounted for." "Well done, Mrs. Brennan." The baby was placed on Eleanor's chest, red-faced and furious, with dark hair plastered to her small head. Eleanor looked down at her daughter and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known possible. This tiny person, this perfect combination of her and William, was real and here in theirs. "She's beautiful," William said, his voice choked with emotion. He reached out with one finger to touch their daughter's tiny hand, and she immediately gripped it with surprising strength. "Look at that. She knows her papa already." "What should we name her?" Eleanor asked, exhausted but happy. William was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the baby. "Violet. After your sister, the one who made the mistake that brought you to me. Seems fitting." Eleanor felt tears stream down her face. "Violet Brennan. I love it." And Violet would be honored. Little Violet Rosie, as she quickly became known, transformed the ranch completely. The bunkhouse men took turns coming to the main house to coo over her. These rough cowboys turned gentle by a baby's presence. Franklin held her with careful reverence, his weathered face soft with wonder. Carlos made small wooden toys. Jimmy blushed and stammered, but was surprisingly good at making her laugh. James had left a small gift before departing, a hand-carved rattle that Rosie loved. It was a reminder that people could change, that second chances sometimes worked out. August brought market day, and it was Eleanor's first trip to town since giving birth 6 weeks earlier. She could not leave Rosie yet, so she brought the baby with her, wrapped carefully against her chest. William's cattle sales went well, the ranch officially profitable, their future secure. The town's reaction to the baby was mixed. Some were warm, others judgmental, counting months since the wedding and finding the timing suspicious. But Eleanor no longer cared what most of them thought. It was at the general store that Mrs. Caldwell made her final stand. Eleanor was shopping, Rosie sleeping peacefully in her arms, when Mrs. Caldwell entered with her usual entourage. The woman's eyes went straight to the baby, calculating. "Such a quick arrival," Mrs. Caldwell said loudly to her companions. "One can't help but wonder about the timing. Some might question whether the marriage was truly for practical reasons or covering an indiscretion. The implication was clear and cruel, that Eleanor had been pregnant before the marriage, that she had trapped William. Eleanor could have ignored it, walked away, but she was tired of being this woman's target. She turned to face Mrs. Caldwell directly, and the room went quiet. "Mrs. Caldwell." Eleanor's voice was calm but carried. "You've spent months spreading gossip about my marriage. You questioned my worthiness, my motives, my character. You suggested my husband settled for me out of desperation." She paused, making sure everyone was listening. "But here's the truth you can't accept. William chose me, not because he had to, not because I trapped him, but because we built something real through hard work, mutual respect, and love." She continued, her voice gaining strength. "And I know why it bothers you so much. Your daughter Alice. William rejected her suit last year. You thought if I failed he might reconsider. But I didn't fail. So yes, my daughter arrived quickly by your calculation. But she's legitimate, loved, and surrounded by family who chose to be together." The silence in the store was absolute. Every eye was on Mrs. Caldwell, whose face had gone from pink to white to a mottled red. "How dare you?" Mrs. Caldwell whispered. "How dare you speak to me that way?" "How dare I?" Eleanor's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. "You have spent months trying to destroy my reputation, to hurt my family, to prove I'm not worthy of the life I've built. Why? because your pride was wounded, because your daughter's hopes were disappointed." She shifted Rosie in her arms, the baby still sleeping peacefully through it all. "I'm sorry Alice was hurt, truly. But William made his choice, and it wasn't me who rejected her. He did that long before I arrived." Mrs. Caldwell opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she had nothing to say. An older woman stepped forward, Mrs. Henderson, the doctor's wife. "Harriet, you've gone too far this time. This young woman has done nothing but work hard and be a good neighbor. It's time you accepted that." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the store. Mrs. Caldwell looked around, seeing for the first time that she stood alone. Her friends, her usual supporters, were silent. "Well," she said finally, gathering the shreds of her dignity, "I can see when I'm not wanted." She swept toward the door, but not before Eleanor caught the look in her eyes. Not hatred. Something closer to reluctant respect. The battle was over, and they both knew who had won. The storekeeper's wife stood. "Eleanor's right. She's been nothing but hard-working and respectable," Sarah Mitchell added her voice. "She helped me through a difficult pregnancy. Good neighbor, good friend." Other women murmured agreement. Mrs. Caldwell, realizing she had lost this battle, drew herself up stiffly. "Well, I suppose I was mistaken." She left the store with what dignity she could muster, her entourage following awkwardly. Eleanor stood holding Rosie, surrounded by women who had chosen to support her instead. The room erupted in congratulations, women admiring the baby, offering friendship. Eleanor had finally been accepted by the community, not through compliance, but through character. Autumn settled over the ranch with gold leaves and crisp air. Eleanor managed the household with Rosie. Now part of the rhythm, William balanced ranch work with family time, and their evenings were filled with the sounds of a baby learning to coo and laugh. One October evening, as they sat by the fire with Rosie sleeping in her cradle nearby, a letter arrived from Philadelphia. It was from Violet, full of news about her own pregnancy, asking Eleanor and William to visit the following year. Eleanor wrote back that night, telling her sister about Rosie, about the ranch, about the happiness she had found. "You were right to choose Charles, and your mistake wasn't a mistake at all. It was the path to everything I needed." William read the letter over her shoulder, his arms coming around her waist. "Do you ever regret it? Coming here? Never. Do you regret sending for a bride? I regret I didn't meet you sooner, but I'm grateful for every day since you arrived." They stood at the window looking out at the ranch they had built together. 18 months ago, Eleanor had stepped off a train as the wrong sister, the mistake expecting nothing. Now she was a wife, mother, partner, respected member of the community, everything she had never known she wanted. William was thinking too, she could tell by the way he held her. 18 months ago he had been disappointed, resigned to loneliness. Now he was a husband, father, partner, happier than he had ever imagined possible. "I want Rosie to know the story," William said quietly. "How we started. The wrong bride, the right woman who arrived exactly when needed." He turned her to face him. "I want her to know that mistakes sometimes lead to the best destinations, that practical choices can become love stories. That partnership matters more than passion, though we have both." Eleanor reached up to touch his face. "Then we'll tell her, when she's old enough to understand." Thanksgiving arrived with the first snow, and the house was full. William, Eleanor, baby Rosie Franklin. Carlos, Jimmy, and Sarah's family all gathered around the table. Eleanor had worked so hard to make welcoming. They ate together, shared stories, laughed. This was family, not all bound by blood, but by choice and respect and shared work. Eleanor looked around the table at these people who had become her life and marveled at how far she had come. After everyone left and Rosie was asleep, William and Eleanor stood on the porch watching the snow fall gently on the mountains and pastures. His arm was around her waist, her head on his shoulder, their bodies fitting together with the ease of long familiarity. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. He kissed her forehead. "Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me, for loving me, always, every day, forever." Spring came to Montana again, bringing with it a letter from Denver. James had found steady work, made a small life for himself. The letter was brief, practical, but it ended with words that made William's throat tight. "Thank you for giving me the chance to become a man our mother would have been proud of." Rosie was 6 months old now, rolling over and laughing at everything. She had William's blue-green eyes and Eleanor's stubborn chin. Franklin declared she would be running the ranch before she turned 5, and no one doubted him. One evening, Eleanor and William stood in the garden she had coaxed from the hard Montana earth. The vegetable plants were thriving green and lush. The chickens scratched contentedly in their coop. The house behind them glowed with lamplight, warm and welcoming. "Do you remember what you said?" Eleanor asked. "That day on the platform when you told me I wasn't what you wanted." William's arm tightened around her waist. "I was wrong. You were exactly what I needed. I just didn't know it yet." "Mrs. Caldwell saw me in town last week," Eleanor continued. "She asked about Rosie. Actually seemed interested. Miracles do happen then. She apologized, in her way, said she'd been unkind." William snorted. "That's one word for it." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. "I told her I forgave her, because holding on to anger only hurts the person carrying it, and I'm done carrying anything but love." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth. Soft kisses, full of tenderness. "How did I get so lucky? You sent for a bride and got a partner instead. I'd say that's more skill than luck." Behind them, Rosie's cry drifted from the house, not distressed, just awake and wanting attention. William and Eleanor walked back together, partners in everything toward the home they had built from mistakes and hope and choice. The wrong bride had found her place, and in finding it she had made it right, not just for herself, but for everyone whose lives she had touched. The story that began with disappointment had transformed into something beautiful, not despite the mistakes, but because of them. Because sometimes the wrong path leads exactly where you need to be. And that was the truth Eleanor would tell Rosie someday. That love is not always what you expect. That family is not always what you're born into. That home is not always where you start, but where you choose to stay. Montana taught her that. William taught her that. The ranch, the land, the endless sky, they all taught her that belonging is earned through sweat and honesty and refusing to give up even when everything seems wrong. She was Eleanor Brennan now and forever, the wrong bride who became exactly the right woman, and she had never been more certain of anything in her life. This was home. This was love. This was everything. And it was more than enough. It was everything that mattered. Inside the warm house held the life they had built together. Outside Montana stretched vast and wild, full of challenges that would come. But they would face them together. Partners. Equals. Chosen, always chosen. Their story had begun with a mistake, with the wrong woman stepping off a train into an uncertain future. But it had become something beautiful, a testament to the power of second chances, to the strength found in honesty, to the love that grew from respect and shared purpose. Eleanor Hayes had arrived in Montana as the wrong bride. But she had become Eleanor Brennan, exactly the right woman, in exactly the right place, with exactly the right man. And as the snow continued to fall and the stars came out over the vast Montana sky, she knew with absolute certainty that every hardship, every doubt, every moment of uncertainty had been worth it. She had found home, not just a place, but a person, a purpose, a family. She had found everything that mattered. The wrong bride's journey was complete, but the life she and William were building together was just beginning. And it would be built as everything good between them had been built on truth and work and choice. One day at a time, one season at a time, one moment of chosen love after another, forever.